Inside this little machine, we have a number of different elements, including a tiny, tiny pressure sensor, which would fit into the period at the end of a sentence, antenna in order to accomplish the transmission of the data out. It's got a microcontroller. We've got a tiny battery in there, a communication chip, an accelerometer. So just that's to give you an idea that this is a very sophisticated piece of machinery.
Dr. Will Hendren, CEO of Qura. I welcome you to the show. I'm very excited to have you on Startup Health Now.
Well, it's excellent to be here, Logan. Good morning.
So we are having this conversation. I heard through the startup health community about some really cool stuff you're working on. So I wanted to get you onto the show. And I heard that you are really making some substantial progress in miniaturizing medical devices to such a degree that we can implant new types of sensors into the body and really take remote monitoring to a new level. So I wanted to get you on the phone, understand where we're at, both at the micro level, no pun intended, of what you're building, but also the macro level of kind of where are we at in the industry of implantable devices. It's a big conversation. So why don't you start by just giving us an understanding of what you've built with Qura, and we can kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for inviting me to speak with you. So we're really excited about what we're doing at Qura. Qura was really founded with the basic premise of being able to measure pressure in the human body, regardless of where that pressure is being measured, and getting that information out of the body in some sort of way that could be useful clinically. And so what we really are all about is very, very specialized, highly miniaturized technologies for small implantable sensors to measure pressure, to then transmit pressure wirelessly out of the body automatically in a way that can really revolutionize the care of patients with certain chronic diseases, such as hypertension, which is our first target.
Okay. Talk to me about some of the technologies that had to be developed in order to check blood pressure in a device that is small enough to be implanted.
Well, that's a big and loaded question because we have a tremendous amount of innovation and patented technology around what we're doing. And this is a story which has been in evolution for well over 5 years now. So the first is that we've perfected the art of extreme miniaturization of all of the kinds of components, electric and otherwise, that are needed to get things into a very small size so that we can put them in different parts of the body without them being noticed at all. Number two is that we've perfected some technologies around how we actually coat and protect all of these components in such a way that they function beautifully and are not injured at all. Number three is we've got a lot of technology that we've developed on how we actually power this. And a lot of this technology simply was not possible as 3 or 4 years ago. But so we can actually power this internally with a tiny, tiny little solid state rechargeable solid lithium battery. We've dramatically made some new technical advances in how then we can wirelessly transmit the data out of the body and at the same time keep the battery charged wirelessly by two-way street, getting power into the implant at all times. So there's a lot of innovation,
Yeah.
many patents that sort of underpin all this. But the exciting thing is that it works, and we are well on the way down with our first implantable device.
Interesting. Question for you. I'm guessing that extreme miniaturization of these types of technologies exist in other fields that have had to sort of move that direction first, and now we're seeing it in healthcare more. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think that's, yeah. And I think in healthcare, the story of miniaturization is really important because, there are many, many potential applications that we can address with what we're doing. And so it's really important if you're going to stick things in the human body, that, obviously we can't stick something the size of a microwave in a human body. So this concept of having things at a really small scale are really highly important and are core to our story. The reality of it is that I believe when all is said and done, we're going to have one of, if not the smallest implanted devices on the market today in healthcare. And we can even go further, and we will in the future.
Okay, let's talk about use cases. You mentioned hypertension. You mentioned measuring blood pressure. Talk to me about that potential use case, kind of what's being tested and how it could impact patients.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my background is I am a dyed-in-the-wool cardiac surgeon in my former life, and so I've spent my entire professional career around cardiovascular disease. And this actually was ideated, and the first application was for creating a really, really small device to put in the human eye to measure glaucoma. But it became very relevant and apparent to me when I took over the company that the cardiovascular world is just enormous, enormous in size and complexity. And so many of the diseases that we take care of every day are directly related to pressure. Diseases like high blood pressure or hypertension, congestive heart failure, and many, many others. And so our first application is a very small device to put just underneath the skin on top of an easily accessed artery, such as the radial artery, which runs in your forearm. It is an ideal landing target. And then just under local anesthesia, position this, and you will have continuous, very high quality blood pressure data. In fact, we have proven, and this was a really big seminal event, and we knew this would work, that we actually have proven that the pressure that we get with this and with this approach is totally equivalent to actually having an interarterial line placed in a person. And every medical student knows that that's really the gold standard
Wow.
of pressure measurement. So we're pretty excited that we can get and deliver data that is of the very highest quality and accuracy that is equivalent to the so-called gold standard, but without having to stick something into the artery itself.
Yeah, I mean, just for our listeners who aren't familiar with, the clinical side here, we're talking about the gold standard being something highly invasive, right?
It's invasive. I wouldn't heart surgery is highly invasive.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't consider intraarterial line, but yes, it
But
is
you're in the hospital. You're
you're in
being
the ICU or in the operating
ICU. You're
room.
being monitored
Correct.
constantly.
It's not something you do casually.
Yeah, compared to, this implantable. Um, when I mentioned the idea of implantable, something in your forearm to, a friend, when we're just talking, they get concerned about putting medical devices under the skin. And I think part of that is sort of forgetting about all of the other things that we implant,
Oh my
like the
gosh, yes.
so kind of remind us about the implantable market and how this is not really a new concept of putting something battery powered in the body.
Oh, not at all, not at all. In fact, healthcare today would not be where it is without the kinds of devices and implants that are available. And I laugh at that. The reality of it is implants have been around for well over 70 or 80 years.
Mm,
What I is a heart surgeon every day putting new heart valves in and implanting pacemakers and all these kinds of diseases. These are all big implantable devices.
hmm
So the reality of it is, and I'm holding this up for you. I don't know if you can actually see or project that, but
Yeah.
it is our first generation device.
Okay.
It'll fit.
Wait, hold it up against what I see it. So for those listening on the podcast, it's about the length of what
Your thumbnail.
a thumbnail. Okay, maybe a little less than an inch.
Yeah,
It looks like a medium-sized pill that you might swallow. Is that fair?
yeah, yeah. That's not too bad. That's not too bad of the descriptor of it. And just for fun, I actually took this just to give you this, uh, and that is, let me just mention something about this. This device is a little machine. So in this is a whole bunch of technology that makes all of this possible. Inside this little machine, we have a number of different elements, including a tiny, tiny pressure sensor, which would fit into the period at the end of a sentence, just to give you an idea of the scale of things. It's actually got a antenna in order to accomplish the transmission of the data out. It's got a microcontroller. We've got a tiny battery in there, a communication chip, an accelerometer, so just that's to give you an idea that this is a very sophisticated piece of machinery, all fitting into that form factor.
Just to back you up for a second, you're a surgeon. You're not an expert in miniaturizing devices. Talk to me about the process of figuring out how to accomplish some of these difficult tech, challenges.
Well, I am a surgeon, but I'm also feel like that I've got a lot of expertise now in engineering and some of these elements because we're extremely fortunate to be working with some of the most talented and experienced biomechanical engineers in the world who have expertise in all of the kinds of things that go into this. So experts in sensor technology, expertise in wireless data communication, in powering and batteries, in AI. This is all about the data that we're going to generate. And AI is going to be an important anchor and part of that story. Because at the end of the day, this is all about eliminating the problems that are associated with the management of hypertension today. And I think it would be important for your listeners to actually understand why we're going after hypertension in this particular market.
Yeah.
I invite any of the listeners to just go to our website, www.cura-med.com, because on that we have some hyperlinks to, explain the huge issue related to hypertension in the world today. You can quickly access the U.S. Surgeon General's report and the very recently released WHO report on global hypertension. And the scope of the issue and the numbers are just mind-boggling. Over 1.5 billion people worldwide with high blood pressure. In the United States alone, 1 out of every 2 U.S. adults with the problem.
Mm.
And of those, 1/3 of the people with hypertension are at extremely high risk from having the disease, where it actually causes huge problems such as death and complications. It's the number one cause of stroke. It's the number one cause of heart failure, renal failure, and a multitude of other life-threatening diseases. So it's a huge, huge
Yeah.
problem. And the problem with the management of it today, and this has been known for a long time, is really pretty simple. And that is that there really is no reliable way to measure blood pressure in a reproducible way that actually can then, what I'd like to call, it's actionable, meaning that the data can get to the caregivers in a way that informed decisions can be made. And the second huge problem with the management of hypertension is one in general that's in healthcare, and that is poor patient compliance. so many people just don't do what they need to do. And so the reality of it is, if you ask them to be participating in their care and doing this and getting their blood pressure, they're just unable to handle it. And so Qura was designed, and this was designed specifically to answer those two problems. And we solve both of these problems. We get really high quality, continuous data that is readily in the hands of the people who need to make the decisions. And number two, it's automatic. It's like that ever ready bunny.
Yeah,
Once it's in, always on, always working. And the data is there. The patient doesn't need to do a darn thing to have the advantage of this high quality data. And
interesting.
coming back to your question about implants, as a surgeon, I never in my entire career had a patient who ever didn't do what we recommended to do. And this is going to be a game changer. This is going to add life and quality of life to their care with
When you
many advantages.
when you say they did what you did, what you suggested, if
Yeah,
you suggested you need a pacemaker, they didn't say, "Oh, I don't like,
absolutely.
I don't like
Exactly.
implantables." They said, "I'll take it, doc."
Exactly.
Let's get really practical about how life would be different. Let's sort of fast forward 5 years. Let's say you work through all the safety trials that you need to do, and someone with hypertension or the risk of hypertension gets the implantable. Now they have continuous data coming to them, assumedly, and to their doctor.
Yep.
My assumption is that they're able to watch a line of data and see highs and lows. It sounds a little bit like wearing a continuous glucose monitor. Are there parallels there that are important?
I think that's a great parallel. And so, continuous glucose monitoring is the real deal. I lost my only sister from diabetes, from juvenile diabetes. And so it's a
Mm,
disease that I've, dealt with my entire life on one level or another. And, the advances in diabetic care are just dramatic. And the big story now is the ability to have continuous reading of blood sugar by the patient in a very responsible, reproducible way. And it's not a perfect solution. The technology there is not as a permanent solution, meaning you got to change the sensor not infrequently. It's got some cost issues, but good Lord, having the blood sugar right in front of you and being able to make smart decisions about what you eat or whether you need more insulin is now it's the gold standard. It is the standard of care. And so your analogy is correct. And we believe that what we'll be doing and being able to have that blood pressure immediately and continuously on your smartphone is a huge advance.
So,
And
so if you have,
yes, that
so
is
if
a
you,
good
so if you
analogy.
have type 1 diabetes, you see that you're hypo or hyper, your blood sugar's up or
Yeah.
down, and you maybe immediately do something to kind of remedy that situation. You're real time adjusting. Do you see that kind of real time adjustments happening with hypertension, or is this more about like longitudinal data?
So it's actually about both, but mostly about the longitudinal data. So one thing I can promise you is that we're going to totally change the understanding of hypertension because the data that we're going to be producing just is not available today. And so this is not about the minute to minute blood pressure, so to speak, as more about the trend data and the trend analysis. And so it's not that the doctors or others are going to get flooded with, data continue. It's, once a month we'll have a snapshot where we can, download that patient data. There's your whole trend. There's the month right in front of you. Look at this. Mrs. Smith goes up to, 180 over whatever every night around this time. It's going to be able to really personalize and tailor therapy to them. But at the same time, we will have alerts. So that means if someone is fragile and the doctor does not want to see that blood pressure going over or wants to know if the blood pressure is out of a range that is important, that will immediately trigger alerts to the patient and to the caregiver. And so it's about both. But in my opinion, it's the long-term trend data because it is all about the data. And really, it's about the data that we will be able to analyze. And we will be able to do so-called predictive analytics.
Mm,
We're going to be able to tell when patients are starting to get into trouble because it usually happens. Those kinds of things get telegraphed well before symptoms actually develop. And that's actually one of the problems with hypertension. It's nicknamed the silent killer.
mm.
And that's because people aren't aware of it as they might when a blood sugar goes to, very low levels, they get dizzy or they pass out or they know it. Hypertension, that's not necessarily the case. And
Yeah.
so we're pretty excited about, how this is going to greatly impact the care of patients with this
So
really
this
very
is this
significant
has been a
problem.
long time in coming. These types of devices take a long time to prove out safety. Um, when will this be available for my loved ones in the future? And
Yeah, so
what will it take to get there?
yeah, that's a great question. So the reality of it is we are marching forward very quickly. All of the proof has been demonstrated in animals as well, and we are going to be in human beings, targeting being in humans by the end of this year.
Wow.
As most of your listeners will understand, there's a process to the path of getting to the market, but we're extremely confident of that. And we think that we will have a device in the market and approved in a year and a half from now.
Is this a crowded market? Is there like a race towards miniaturized implantables, or do you feel like you're kind of out in front?
Well, I clearly think we're out in front. So the world is starting to wake up to the problem of hypertension and what a big problem it is. And that's reflected in some of the new devices that are coming to market by some big companies, such as that are things for renal denervation and other methods for taking care of patients with hypertension, newer drugs, better drugs. But the reality of it is we are unique. We are the only implantable solution, or I will say we will be the first implantable solution to market. And our approach is just head over heels, more streamlined, and has so many advantages to, the current standards of measuring blood pressure. And I like to, sort of, it might be a good point to, this is not a high cost solution.
Hmm.
Our device, and this is going to be a low cost solution with all of that machinery in here, is a low cost solution because at scale we can manufacture this quite inexpensively. And so I like to say that a 15-minute little procedure under local anesthesia in the doctor's office that gives you a lifetime of high quality continuous blood pressure data, that's worth the ticket of admission, the price of admission.
Wow. Wow. Listening to you, my assumption is that this will become a platform, as we say, and that measuring blood pressure would just be one metric. But once you have all the miniaturization technology in place, there are probably other biometrics that you'll do in the future.
Well, you stole some thunder. The reality of it is, yes, this is a platform technology, and we have a number of very attractive and interesting use cases, again, around the concept of biosensor,
Yeah, makes sense.
wireless transmission, implantation, and longevity.
Yeah. This market is so hot and there's so many different ways people are thinking about how to take, ambient biosensors. Uh, People must be looking at you. There must be a sense of sort of like a race towards the best, cheapest, most ambient, cost-effective biosensors on the market. Do you feel like that's the case?
Well, I don't know how quickly the race is being won because there's a lot of blocking and tackling that has to happen ahead of time. As I said, we've been at this now for well over 5 years. We have a very significant patent portfolio to back up what we're doing. And the reality of it is that this is all good. there's not going to be one device or one sensor approach that fits everything. And I'm a big supporter of, the competition, because I actually view this as, it is going to be a combination of things. And I have no question in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, this is going to be very commonplace, and that people are going to have more than one biosensor and more than one approach to that particular biosensor. This is not a fantasy. This is not Star Wars. This is real stuff, real medicine. And the future, as many of the listeners know, is in data. And that's what we're all about. Better data, better patient care.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Hendren, that's a beautiful note to end on. I love that note about encouraging the competition. It's a rising tide that's going to lift all boats. Patients are going to have different devices for different needs, and it's a time to encourage the entire ecosystem of innovation, not try to grab at what we can at the expense of others. So I appreciate that sentiment.
Yeah, well, that's how the world evolves.
Nice. Dr. Hendren, thank you for your time today. We are excited about what you've built and kind of the moment you're at now as you move into human trials this year. That's so exciting. We'll be watching and looking for the next big update. But this is game changing. So I appreciate you giving me the update.
Well, I'm delighted to do it, and happy to join you anytime you ask.
All right. All right. Well, you be well, and we'll check in soon.
All right. Thank you, Logan.
Take care. Quick word about this show, in case you're new around here. At Startup Health, we believe in broadcasting the stories of Health Moonshot progress, the stories of the most forward-thinking entrepreneurs in health. If you want more of this good news about healthcare's problem solvers, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, hit that notification button, and follow us on social media at Startup Health.